Here we got a 1958 Chevy Impala. You notice the mirrors are up on top of the fenders. A little bit different. You know, usually they're up on the doors. These are up on the fenders. You don't see as many of these around, not because the cars weren't cool. This was actually when they first went to the quad headlights and stuff. Bigger car. The problem why you don't see as many of these around is because in 1958 there was a severe recession, not a depression, a severe recession in the United States during the Eisenhower years. So that was one of the reasons these didn't sell. Usually you see, if you see a 58 Chevy of this full size, it usually will be a Bel Air, or I think it's a Bel Air. The one that's like doesn't have as much body trim as this one. This is the Impala, so this has got all the body trim on it. It's cool how they got dual headlights, and you got the parking lot, the turn signals. It's like mimicking the headlights, you know. This guy's really good. Went out to some style and Q. Now you probably don't pick up on this, or maybe some of the younger folks don't. This V here, they always have that V on a lot of the cars. That means it's got a V8 in it. Because not much before this, you're talking a lot of the, the only thing that was you had the Ford flathead, but the Chevys were 6 cylinders in the early 50s. I forgot when they came out with that small block. I think in 55 they had the 265 small block. So this is only 58, so that's why they brag about it. You got the Impala. And look at the interior. This is the type of interiors they would do, like 3 different colors. You can get all kinds of different things in it, like in other words you'd have just a choice of a beige or a gray interior. You had multiple colors to match the body. Here you got 2-tone paint on the outside, all this chrome trim. And relatively speaking, they'll tell you, like, with the inflation, that the cars are really about priced the same because we got all these electronic things. You gotta remember, these cars are actually produced by people that were, like, in other words, I think in the corporate world at that time, there was not as much people, there's not as many people on the top that were skimming the gravy off the profits. In other words, there was more going into the product back in the 50s. That's why the consumer got a better deal, Sort of like, big corporations, even in the tech companies. You figure that the guys that do the work probably don't get paid nothing. The CEOs get big bucks, right, Susan? Guys that do the work is me, right? So here we have, the ignition on these too. You notice that key there says lock and on. I don't know if you noticed that right there. Lock and on. You can actually pull the key out without it being locked, without the ignition, and then you can start it without the key. That was at a time when people didn't steal as many cars, Actually, these cars would be really easy to steal because you didn't have an inside hood latch. You can open up the hood from the outside. You can hot wire the distributor to the battery. Then you can jump it with the solenoid on the starter and just start it that way without even going under the dash. Big cars though, and the metal on these was thicker. I don't think it was like today. Well, I don't know what the cars. I mean, I know most cars you can run 18 gauge when you're repairing steel. These older cars, it's a little thicker than 18 gauge, a little bit thicker. But these were getting thinner metal from the 30s and 40s already. These are already going more lightweight. But compared to even the 60s and now, now they're made out of tissue paper and plastic. Tissue paper, steel foil. Today the bodies on the cars are so thin. The steel, you probably don't notice too, they spray foam behind the steel. So if you in other words, if you didn't have that foam, like on the newer cars, if you're leaning on a quarter panel or something, you would actually cave it in. So they spray foam on it. And actually that problem with that foam is sometimes, in the rust belts, that foam will retain water. Then you got thin metal, it's covered up with thin metal, and you got these big holes. Like these cars, if they would have treated them with Cosmoline or something like that, they had that product out since the 1800s, they would have lasted to this day. They just rusted out mainly. Because you can always rebuild them. Got the wide white walls on it and everything, right? Looks sweet. It's really sweet. 58 Chevy Impala. Pretty rare because they said the recession of that time, not many of them sold because there was nobody had money. And usually, if they bought a 58, it wouldn't be the Impala. This is the more upscale one with all the trim on it and stuff.